Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the top reports from the global economy. Coming up today, Ramallah opens its first high-tech park, and corruption tours in Bucharest expose Romania's shady culture. First, the headlines. China's economic growth slowed to its weakest pace in 18 months, pressuring Beijing to consider yuan depreciation. China's economy grew 7.4% year-on-year in the first quarter, well below the 7.7% level seen in the fourth quarter of 2013, and slightly below the 2014 annual target of about 7.5%. Quarterly growth slowed as investment and consumption dropped. China only missed its annual target once before in 2012 and acted in response by significantly easing credit. Allowing the yuan to fall helps troubled exporters and lifts growth, but the U.S. warned that currency manipulation could signal Beijing's unwillingness to let market forces play a bigger role.
I think, first of all, it's still very fragile in terms of for example, the March activity data. You're still seeing some slowing in momentum, and of course, you've had also quite a bit weaker data in both exports and also the M2 growth numbers. So we still think some help is needed just to stabilize the growth profile. But in terms of monetary policy, yes, I think it probably means that you won't get as aggressive a reaction as, say, a cut in the RRR rate or in the policy interest rate.
Alibaba is gearing up for a U.S. IPO that could raise $15 billion, boosted by a recent slate of positive data. During the fourth quarter, Alibaba's revenue jumped 66% from a year earlier to $3.1 billion. Profits more than doubled to $1.35 billion, valuing the company, which handles roughly 80% of all online shopping in China, well in excess of $150 billion. Alibaba's site Taobao has about 800 million product listings from 7 million sellers who pay Alibaba for advertising and other services. In 2013, the combined transaction volume of Taobao and Tmall reached $240 billion. The total is more than double the size of Amazon, triple the size of eBay, and one-third larger than the value of all their transactions last year combined. GM Chief Executive Mary Barra said the automaker will create a global organization to focus on product safety and quality. Barra's announcement comes after the recall of 2.6 million cars for defective ignition switches, which she admitted GM messed up. At least 13 people have been killed in older model GM small cars with the defective switches. GM estimates that its investigation into the recall will be completed by the end of May.
We work on those every day. Some of the questions are really dependent to have the full, complete answer on getting through the investigation, but we are trying to be as responsive as possible, but we will not sacrifice the accuracy and the right detail of the answers, because it's very important. This is a very complex situation. It's very important. But we are working on it with a dedicated team that works around the clock to provide the answers to NHTSA.
UN Secretary General Ban KiMoon, in an OECD-sponsored meeting in Mexico City, called for the creation of concrete initiatives to bolster global development. Ban said initiatives should aim to strengthen country-level ownership and uphold development cooperation commitments to achieve sustainable development. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto said to achieve the social transformation we all want on a global level, we need to mobilize the collective power of each nation.
Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation has a crucial contribution to make. I hope to see concrete message and initiatives coming out of this meeting that will strengthen country-level ownership, uphold development cooperation commitments, and inform our discussions at the United Nations. I count on your leadership as we work together to achieve sustainable development.
Recent housing data in the U.S. suggests the market's spring selling season is off to a slow start. February data for pending home sales nationally, an indicator of early spring activity, show a decline of 11% from a year ago. An index of home buyer traffic in 40 U.S. markets compiled by Credit Suisse was down more than a third from March of last year. Potential buyers are still adjusting to a sharp rise in both home prices and borrowing costs over the past year. The median monthly home payment in the U.S., including principal and interest, has risen 20% in the past year to about $900. Israel will adopt EU regulations making imports of non-sensitive foods cheaper. Israel will implement the EU's method of food imports, which allows unrestricted imports of non-sensitive products without customs duties. The reforms open the market to massive imports of food products, expanding the range of products with the objective of increasing competition and lowering consumer prices. Imports of non-sensitive foods account for half of Israel's food imports, and import duties on food total $3 to $4 billion a year. But before consumers can benefit from lower food prices, additional measures by the Antitrust Authority, the Ministry of the Economy, and the Ministry of Finance are also needed. In addition, it will also be necessary to deal with the overconcentration of retailers. Ramallah is now home to its very own tech park and startup accelerator to support up-and-coming companies. Anthony Lesmy and Nathalie Erlich have the story.
Welcome to the E-Zone. The first Palestinian tech park was inaugurated this morning in Ramallah. Funded in part by the U.S., but also to a lesser extent European and Arab funds, the site of 800 square meters comprises a common workspace for young companies specializing in high technology. There's also Fast Forward, a startup accelerator funded mainly by the NGO Welfare Association.
Fast Forward is, again, Palestine's first business accelerator. We're investing in teams with ideas in the field of web and mobile, investing at the amount of $50,000 in each in exchange for 8% equity.
One of the next success stories in this space is Fikash. This young startup allows individuals to pay for online products and services without a credit card.
Fast Forward also connected us to a lot of people. Mentors, we have about 3 mentors right now, one in the U.S., one in the Gulf, and one over here. And in coaches, basically they support us with anything we need.
USAID is a major partner of the project. The aid agency is directly controlled by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and invests more than $370 million per year in the Palestinian territories, and increasingly in electronic projects.
First of all, we invest in success, and we think that the tech sector in Ramallah is going to be very successful. We connect entrepreneurs to money. That's investors, whether or not they're from Palestinian or international. We connect them to opportunities. A lot of the time that's U.S. big multinational corporations like Google and Microsoft and Cisco and Oracle. And we connect them to skills and learning and opportunities. U.S.
Secretary of State John Kerry even announced last year a U.S. plan to invest $4 billion in the Palestinian territories. Already, Silicon Valley giants like Google, Cisco, and Intel, as well as public stakeholders together, are helping develop the Palestinian economy. Prosperity is seen as a path towards peace and the growth of a future Palestinian state.
For us, for the United States government that's looking long-term, looking for the creation of a Palestinian state with a healthy, sustainable economy, a private sector economy, a technologically driven economy is the way to go.
Although neither the West Bank or Gaza have access to 3G or broadband internet, in just 10 years, a tech ecosystem is off the ground. With 300 companies and 2,000 graduating engineers, the Palestinian high-tech economy has reached 6% of GDP, up from 0.8% back in 2008.
There is already more than $100 million of funding from different funds, investment funds, allocated to this sector. I think the challenge has been to find new ideas and new projects, the new entrepreneurs who will translate these ideas into businesses, into operations.
The minister in his speech spoke of Palestine as a future startup nation in the Arab world, which mirrors Israel's appeal as a startup nation. Although Palestinians have orders not to normalize economic relations with Israel, is there any chance in the field of high tech?
You would find companies in Palestine that are providing outsourcing to Israel, so it's already happening. Hopefully the startups will be selling their products globally and generating income to Palestine from Israel and other countries. That's something we're looking for.
The progress will depend on the political situation as well as the peace process. As economic opportunities, they are real at the regional level. The Arabic internet market has more than 80 million users, and the demand for it is only growing.
Most tourists flock to Bucharest to admire its historic sculptures, but a new group of tourists is discovering a darker side of Romania's capital city as they take part in a corruption tour. The following report has more.
These visitors in Bucharest aren't admiring the city's fine architecture. They're learning about something much more subversive in Romanian culture: corruption. During this tour, they visit the houses of former politicians convicted of corruption, along with buildings where dodgy dealings were negotiated. This was once home to Prime Minister Adrian Nastase, who's now serving a 4-year prison term for taking bribes.
People working in government-run institutions had to pay €125 each to take part in the Quality Trophy conference. But it had nothing to do with quality. It was just a bribe used to finance Nastase's presidential campaign. It raised €1 million, just like that.
The corruption tour was set up by the One World Documentary Festival to encourage people to think about the effects of corruption in Eastern Europe. According to Transparency International, countries belonging to the former Eastern Communist bloc practice the most underhand dealings, but change is afoot.
I tried and it worked. We usually have to bribe doctors to receive treatment, but I refused and he did not send me away. I think we can make things change.
I believe in a clean system, and I think that's starting here. Maybe our generation won't see the improvements, but the next one will, and that's the most important thing.
Last year, more than 1,000 Romanian officials, including ministers, police officers and mayors, were sentenced for corruption, around 10 times more than in 2006. With corruption under increasing scrutiny in Romania, change is underway.
And we now delve into some more thought-provoking news topics from the media around the world in Media Watch with Nathalie Erlich. Nathalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having you. That's a joke. Okay, so what's the first thing we have here?
Absolutely. So today we have a trifecta of Google in the news.
Yeah.
Firstly, Google is out with its Google Glass.
Google
have you
Glass.
seen one of these before?
I actually haven't gotten the chance to see them, which means actually, please Google send me one so I can actually evaluate properly. Yeah, it's a wearable computer essentially, no?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, unless you were this major geek in Silicon Valley and you had access to one of these testers, you've been able to use it, but now it's available to the mass consumer. So you can log on to this site and get your own Google Glass. It's $1,500. So as you can see here in these images, it's essentially like a wearable computer. It works like a smartphone, but you don't use your fingers at all. It's
voice operated?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you can even take photos with it.
Great. It just seems to me like it's like an ideal way to completely just close yourself off from the rest of the world. I mean, is that an unfair statement or?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, if you even look at an iPhone, we certainly sometimes close ourselves off from the rest of the world.
Even more so.
Potentially. I mean, that's perhaps the weird of the world in our future. So there's also another really interesting article that appeared today. It was in the Washington Post. Really in-depth article looking at Google and its influence in Washington.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So essentially, Google started off as this company that was kind of disdainful of the Washington lobby machine. It started off with only a one-man shop operation in Washington to lobby Congress and the key players there. And now it's just become this huge powerhouse. One interesting point that the article made in terms of corporate expenditures, it ranks number 2 after General Electric in terms of wooing the lobby there. So that's pretty astounding, just because General Electric is notorious. It's for even potentially evading taxes. So
right. In terms of Google Israel, I mean, is there something special to mention there?
Not in the article per se, but the thing that really impressed me was how Google is able to make an influence and woo the key players there in kind of a unconventional approach. Going a bit behind the scenes.
Like a new House of Cards, kind of.
Yeah, going behind the scenes and able to influence the key players. So they're even giving money to universities, think tanks to write research that will be sympathetic to the company. They have Google fellows at major think tanks. And even, in the back, before we had Eric Schmidt there, who was a former CEO of the company, he was a strong supporter of the Obama administration. And now in order to woo the conservative base, Google Google is giving money to conservative groups like Heritage.
Basically learn how to play the game, huh?
Absolutely. Learn from Google how to play politics, essentially.
But essentially, I mean, but they're still under pressure, surely, I mean, in terms of being too much of a monopoly or too much, monopolizing the internet and all that. I mean, how are they dealing with that? They can't really entirely get away from it,
So this is actually the most impressive example that this article makes, is that ahead of a major FTC probe on Google's domination of search engine, it was able to go behind the scenes with this conference hosted by George Mason University and invite the key players in tech, in the legal arena. And when actually these people were being approached by the FTC to speak out against Google, they
Nathalie.
refused.
Well, we're going to have to go. I'm going to refuse to let you go on as well. Thank you very much. This is all the time for you today. I'm Benjamin Chang-Faris. Send us your comments and join us again tomorrow.